It is the Justin Perri Show. Welcome in to episode 4. You know, every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here at 4 p.m. Chopping it up with some of the best of the best. Always bringing in interesting perspectives, sharp minds in basketball. Some baseball in the summer. We'll switch the logo around. You'll see. But it is conference tournament week. We have so much going on. March Madness is just a couple weeks away. Selection Sunday already on the horizon. Pretty crazy to think about. I'm not going to waste any time here today. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Follow wherever you're seeing it so you continue to. But we have some great guests. I'm going to bring in Matt and Tom. You might know Tom from Sportsline, some of his work there, sports betting director over at NOLA.com too. And Matt Winnick is over at The Score. Tom, how you doing today, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really excited. So if people maybe don't know a lot of your work, I'm not sure how many that's going to be because you've been doing a great job. A must follow, new ad over at Sportsline. Maybe tell some of the folks at home what you've done, how you got into some sports betting, and what you're most excited about for March.
Yeah, well, listen, I started betting sports over 30 years ago. You know, my dad was a degenerate gambler, a bookie, so I got in kind of the wrong way. So I had to learn some tough early lessons in my teens and my early 20s that I think helped shape me today. Yeah,
I love it.
You know, you lose a few $1,000s and you have to ditch some bookies. You learn what not to do. So listen, I'll be at college basketball for whatever reason has always been my best sport. Even when I was losing a lot, I always seem to do well in college basketball. So I've always gravitated to that sport in terms of where I'm going to make my most money every year. It just, however, my capping style, it works well with college basketball. And I'm having one of my best, I'm having my best season ever this year. So hopefully we can continue in March.
I love it. I love it. We'll get into all that. We'll talk a little bit about your style, whatever you're willing to share of the secret sauce. But Matt, same goes for you, man. Welcome to the show. Tell the people at home a little bit about where they can find your work, what you do, and your intro to sports betting. Hopefully not as dramatic as Tom's, but I love it. That is exactly what the type of conversation I want to have on the show. Welcome into anybody who's joining us a little bit late. We have some great guests here today. Let's hear from Matt Winnick.
Yeah, that is not my intro into sports betting. I was, obviously biggest sports fan growing up. And so I was into sort of the beginning stages of gambling as I was getting a little older and old enough to actually gamble. And then I started working, like you mentioned, at The Score, doing content just for basketball. And I sort of got into the betting space for college basketball because that space was empty. And from there, I kind of got off to a hot start. I had never really done handicapping or anything like that before. And I sort of just did my betting analysis based off of my knowledge of basketball. And so as time went on from there, I sort of found ways to combine my knowledge of basketball, then adding on to the analytics part, then adding on to knowing more about betting, the industry, and the market. And I've sort of tried to combine my expertise, which is the game, into the betting space to, try to become profitable, which some months are easier than others. You know how it goes.
Oh, I know how it is very well. I think anybody who plays long in this sport does. Pardon any sirens. Of course, you guys know I'm in New York. It can get a little loud, even in the middle of the day. But let's get into a little bit of what we've seen in the ASUN. Tom, what have you made of EKY's collapse?
Yeah, it's interesting. I took Stetson because I thought plus 600 on the opening number was just a little high for them. I thought they could beat any team in that league. And it's interesting because I didn't write this script. I didn't think the 1 seed was going to go, the 3 seed was going to go, and then the 4 seed almost went as well. The thing about the ASUN is that, and the reason why I took Stetson at that number is a lot of these teams are really close. Even your Northern Alabama, those teams are all kind of jumbled together. So when I look at conference tournaments, now, is this a conference where we can have craziness, or is this a conference like the Sun Belt where I think it's going to be 1 versus 2, where there's not as much value on the board? And I thought this was one of those conferences. I didn't think it'd be this crazy, but I thought we could get some upsets in it.
We did get some upsets. Matt, did you see the finishes to any of these? Anything kind of like stand out? It's an interesting start to March to get such dramatics early. I think underdogs have been massively profitable in these elimination games? What have you made of the A-Sun drama? What have you made of the rest of the action so far? We're going to get into a little bit more, but start with the A-Sun.
Yeah, I think watching the end of Austin P and North Florida last night was really eye-opening for me. To me, the A-Sun is kind of filled with two very different teams. There's teams that are super three-point heavy, that take a ton of threes. North Florida, #1 in the entire country in three-point rate. And then there's a couple of extremely heavy ISO teams. Austin P, I believe, is the most heavy isolation team in the country. And then North Alabama is also right up there. And so I was kind of curious when push came to shove which style would end up coming out victorious. And I think what you saw is Austin P took out their big men. They basically went 5 isolation ball handling guards, all 6'3" or under, and they basically just kept the ball in their hands. And they said to North Florida, one-on-one, you beat us with your best players, we'll give the ball to our best player, DeMarcus Sharp. And at the end of the day, when crunch time came and North Florida wasn't running their intricate sets for open threes, the best player, which was DeMarcus Sharp, won. And so I'm kind of wondering now if that's the way to look at the rest of the tournament. Are isolation teams, now that these games are sort of getting more and more important, are the isolation players going to be the ones to bet on in the semifinals and finals?
Tom, any thoughts on that?
No, listen, a lot of times in these tournaments, it comes down to the best player, right? When you get to these mid-major, the lower level tournaments where the teams aren't Kentucky that have 6 scorers on the court at the same time. And that was, when I was looking at taking the futures here, that's exactly what I was looking at. Austin P and I was looking at Stetson. Those were the two teams. And that was the reason why I was interested in Austin P, because they have a player who can just take the tournament over. And the thing that I always think of in like the A-Sun tournaments is, your overall records don't always matter. A lot of these teams, they play 10 straight road games at the beginning of the year. And so you really got to see how they finish the conference season and see who's at the top of their game and who's playing well. And that's why I thought from the start it would be Austin P versus Stetson in the final. And I still think that's going to be the matchup we get.
It looks like those are the odds-on favorites. So you're looking like you're trending to be right. You have been doing a great job calling college basketball. I know I've tailed a few of those first bets over at Sportsline, so I appreciate you. But we'll get into a couple more conferences. Honestly, I think you guys are spot on. It's tough to look at any of these teams as these strong favorites. I think we talked a little bit about it on Monday's panel, but going into it, we should be looking at dogs to be a little undervalued, right? The fact is that there isn't going to be any one team that's going to come in and certainly win in a do or die game. You can feel the energy is different from the regular season. Everybody is playing up in these first games. Anybody can win. Every game kind of up for grabs. So obviously that leans towards plus money, taking the points in terms of how these games actually sort of fall. So a lot of fun in the A-Sun, kind of the craziest one so far. We'll move into a couple of the ones that have maybe behaved a little bit better. Don't have to go into every single one, but Tom, will come to you first. Anything standing out to you in terms of some of these conference tournaments that have gotten underway? The Horizon, the Sun Belt, the Patriot. Not too much action, only a couple of games in each, but anything sort of jumping off the paper to you in terms of performance?
Well, the Horizon's one of those interesting leagues to me because 1 through 6, I don't think there's a ton of separation between those teams. And the game I'm really going to be looking at is that Northern Kentucky Wright State game. Wright State got them twice this year by 7 and 6. Both were competitive, high-scoring games. I think the winner of that game becomes very dangerous in this tournament because I don't think the top couple of seeds are really separated from the rest of the pack. So I'm going to be watching that Wright State Northern Kentucky game with a close eye, and the winner there I think can make a strong run to get into the NCAA tournament.
There we go. Matt, what about you? Anything jumping out from these 3 conferences that have already started a little bit of their action? Of course, plenty more to come. Thursday's card looks packed, but from Tuesday's action so far.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas mentioned it earlier in the show that the Sun Belt kind of seems predetermined with App State and James Madison, and I completely agree. I'm not going to get too deep into that one just because I think there's kind of a collision course with those 2 teams. The Horizon, yesterday should have been easy money. Robert Morris, IUPUI, and Detroit Mercy all really kind of stink, and then Detroit almost knocked off Milwaukee. I think they were up with under 10 minutes to play. And I think that really highlights what you could see in the horizon. There's a stat that the number one seed in the horizon hasn't won in, I think, at least half a decade. And it seems like nobody's picking Oakland. I don't think they're the betting favorites either. And yeah, I'm on Cleveland State. Justin, if I'm not mistaken, I think you have a little future on them as well. Youngstown State scares me a little bit, but if they do get past that Youngstown game on the road, I think that the Green Bay and Milwaukee game that comes up next is not going to be a major challenge. I'm not a huge fan of either of those squads.
Yep, I like it. I took 3 25-1 sprinkles on CSU, Milwaukee, and I think Northern Kentucky. So riding those out, it's going to be fun. Some good prices. That's always the game, right? You want to maybe take good prices. Don't expect always to win it. These are high hold markets, of course. So there can also be, some maybe strategies to talk about. So really good segue. Do you guys always go with futures? I know, Tom, in your Twitter bio that you're a futures bettor. So excited to hear your perspective on this. The future versus the rollover in terms of moneyline parlaying. How do you approach that in March, especially when, everyone's excited to bet on conference winners?
Yeah, and the thing is like I think one of the things like some people still don't understand, like back in April, I took Florida at 100-1. Okay, now Florida's not going to win the NCAA tournament, in my opinion, right? What you're hoping for is they're going to make a run, and you can cash in on your 100-1 ticket, right? So you mentioned about prices. I think like betting futures is a talent, like betting NFL sides. Right, you have to be good. You have to know what you're looking for, and you have to be good at it. And it just happens to be one of the things that I'm good at. I mean, if you want NBA picks, don't come to me, right? But what you said is identifying those numbers that could pay out. If you look at anybody's futures record, like on a tracking thing, I think mine on my tracking is like 14-26, right? But I'm plus 50 units or whatever because I've hit some. It's almost like being a corner in the NFL. you gotta take that loss, and you gotta bounce right back, because you're not going to have a winning record betting futures. So what I like to do in terms of the NCAA tournament is bet a couple ahead of time that hopefully you get a good number on, and then wait till the bracket comes out. I think that's more important now than ever. I think college basketball has changed with the transfer portal. It's not like football. Guys who don't play at Kansas and Kentucky go to places like James Madison and App State and FAU. And, it makes the tournament now a lot more interesting. So I like to look at the tournament brackets now, something I didn't always do 5-10 years ago, and see then where the value is as well.
I definitely agree, and that's the beauty of March Madness, right? Is that there's pathways into the championship tournament that don't necessarily come from just the top teams, the blue bloods, like you maybe do have in football, where if you're not at one of these top schools, your chances of actually being the champion are actually non-existent. And at least in March Madness, coming out of Colgate, these guys they're going to be in the field of 68, and that is a promise that everybody fights for. That we're super excited to see. Only a handful of days away from March Madness. Matt, what do you make of future betting and versus rollovers? Do you ever take some money line rollovers for like a team but are a little hesitant to put down a future, maybe because it's a steeper price, say like a favorite in the conference?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's something Thomas hit on that I think I definitely subscribe to is I definitely prefer to wait for the bracket to come out for these conference tournaments, just because, a lot of the seeding does kind of get dealt with on the final day or two of the regular season, and matchups are key. Home court is key, especially for a lot of these smaller conferences that do have home court. And then I think a big thing that I look forward to is I'm very rarely going to put a future on a top seed or a second seed just because of how unpredictable these are. I don't think that that's really a winner's game given the way that they're priced. And I also think what we saw with Eastern Kentucky, and I think we're going to continue to see, is a lot of these, conference favorites, especially one like Eastern Kentucky, which is, thinking about it from a basketball background, this is a team that brought almost its entire rotation back from last year, where they went to the CBI championship, and there's a lot of seniors on this roster, and they kind of ran through the ASUN, and they were the clear top seed. Motivationally, there's so much pressure. It feels like you press, like you slow the game down, like you need to be perfect. And when you have a number 10 seed, Jacksonville barely even made this tournament. The bottom few seeds don't even get to play. They're happy to be there. A couple days ago, they weren't even projected to be in the field. So motivationally, you've got to see which teams are in a place where this is just way too volatile. It's just like it feels like a landmine. Like you step on the wrong step and then boom, it explodes. And I know that none of us were on Eastern Kentucky, I believe, and they were pretty heavily favored in the ASUN. But with how close that conference is, this is exactly the type of strategy that can come back to bite you.
Hand up. I had to share Eastern Kentucky. Yeah, it was a brutal ASUN. It's okay. It's a brutal ASUN. It happens. Interesting question from Max, a past guest, a future guest, and we'll talk about being future guests soon and late nights and all that fun stuff that we're going to be doing in March. But added pressure, playing at home versus neutral. We'll throw it right into the mix. I love that. How do you handicap the neutral sites, the home sites, the campus sites? Tom, we'll come to you first.
Yeah, I think you really have to look at teams that really struggle to win away from home. Alabama doesn't beat good teams on the road, but they win on the road. It's not like they have one win all season on the road. A team I would be worried about in a neutral court would be Nebraska. Nebraska is a completely different team, home and away. And so teams like that, when you put them on a neutral court, either in a conference tournament, they scare me a little bit. I at least want to see some signs of life. I mean, most teams aren't going to be 12-0 on the road. You're looking for teams that get wins again in tough conference atmospheres. So the fact that Nebraska has one road win right now in conference, and that's against Indiana, which I don't even know if that counts with the corpse that is the Hoosiers right now. But so that's kind of what I'm looking for. I want to see teams that can win away from home, teams that you also have to look at the shooting splits. I mentioned Florida, a team that I like. One thing that's concerning is, for whatever reason, the rims at home are a lot wider for Florida. They're shooting a lot better at home than on the road. Those are things that can trip you up in tournament settings.
I agree. Matt, any take there on how you approach maybe some of these teams that might be showing signs of maybe struggling on the road and now going to these neutral sites? Do you take a look at non-con performance? Any signals that you're hunting for out there?
Yeah, I'm looking at game style. Like Thomas just mentioned, Nebraska, a team that's awesome at home and really struggles on the road. A team that I'm thinking of a reverse would be South Carolina, one of the best road teams in the country this year. And you look at their play styles, Nebraska is a team that runs a lot of motion. They pass the ball through their big men. Rink Master is a great passer. They take a ton of threes, and they make those looks at home behind their home crowd with the familiar rims. South Carolina does not have a very intricate offensive scheme. They have a couple of guards who are pretty ball dominant, who take up a bunch of the shots, Michi Johnson and Talon Cooper. And then they also, post up down low with Colin Murray Boyles. And you think about that, that's just a simple offensive scheme, but they rely on defensive principles. They try to control the pace of the game, and they try to keep the game compact. And when you're on the road or when you're playing on a neutral site, a team that can control the style that isn't going to be, all over the place, motion, offense, shoot a ton of threes. Those are the teams that I'm looking for on the road that I think are able to control pace a lot better, and something I like to target.
Yeah, a little more consistent, something maybe that travels a little bit better. I like that a lot. And again, really appreciate you guys being here today, having already such a great conversation about halfway through what we're going to talk about here on the show. I wanted to talk a little bit about, some of the results that we've seen early on in some of these tournaments, maybe at a little bit more of a zoomed out level, right? Have you really seen anything that's made you change the way you're approaching things, or maybe even the opposite has led you to believe that you should double down on any of your theories that you've had coming into just, the early happenings of March, but it's about to start to get a little busy? I'll come to you first on this one, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely super early. I think that I'm thinking off the top of my head here. One thing that has already bitten me that I think I need to keep in mind, especially for these lower tournaments, is I'm going to bet totals. The late game fouling can be absolutely absurd. If it's like an 8 to 12 point game, and I might be safe by 20 points on an over or an under. I think it was Coastal Carolina and whoever they were playing last night. That one pushed for me. I had the under, and I think there were 22 points in the last minute and 20 seconds.
Ooh. Yeah, Louisiana Monroe, right?
Louisiana Monroe, who I should have known because Louisiana Monroe is a team that has bitten me a couple times this year with fouling down 12, 13 with a minute and a half left, trying to get back into a game they're not getting back into.
Wow.
And with teams basically playing with their season, some with their career on the line, there's going to be a lot of late game fouling that are going to push some unders into over territory.
125 points with 2 minutes to go, finishes at 146. So yeah, that's a little bit of a lean towards first half unders. Maybe I did have a little bit of an inkling towards early tournament overs, and then expecting the teams that are in these tournaments later to probably have a little bit more of a defensive presence that gets them there, especially with the increased offensive efficiencies, maybe the more liberal foul calls for offense. Tom, any thoughts there on this conversation or anything we're talking about?
Yeah, well, listen, God bless you guys for betting college basketball totals. Justin, I know you like to bet them. And I mentioned earlier in the show, go with your strength. That is not my strength for whatever reason. I think I bet one under this year. It was Duke, North Carolina, and they had like 120 points at the half. It's not my strength. And I think one of the reasons I got away from it, is what Matt said, is just the late game fouling. Yeah, I've just never understood. Listen, when you're down by 8 or 10 points with 20 seconds left, it's over, man. Just start the bus up, get those kids out of there. College basketball coaches have the biggest egos of any coaches in any sport. They really do. The 7 timeouts in the final 20 seconds. They're up by 5 with 1.4 seconds left. They got to call a timeout. The kids know what to do. Stay away. Don't foul. And so I think that makes it really hard, especially in the tournament settings, because now it's one and done. And I think, as Matt said, you get more fouls at the end of these games because they're trying to extend it for as long as possible. I know that's something we see in the NCAA tournament a lot. So, yeah, I haven't seen anything yet that's really stuck out to me. I will say this, though. I believe, and this is just my personal opinion, I think conference tournaments can be tough. I think, and one of the reasons it's tough for even somebody like me who's done it for a long time is you kind of have to start over. It's a start over. And one of the things I do like to look for are there teams, especially in these mid-major conferences, that were supposed to have good seasons that may have slipped a little bit, and now they see this as their second chance, second opportunity. So I do think conference tournaments overall are tough to cap, but I'm going to stay away from the totals. You guys, you guys take those over.
No, it's definitely tough, and I do commend Matt. He does a lot of them. I do a little bit here and there. Use the shot quality data every day, usually targeting totals. I find unders can be pretty sharp. It's a tough game. You definitely get some mean sweats, but some of those wins are glorious when those unders come home and it slows down. They start dribbling the ball out. You've never been a bigger hater in your life than when you're betting unders, and it's just so much fun sometimes. Look, again, you can have markets a little bit tilted towards these overs because it can be just the more popular side. I think it is a little conventional, and again, books do a great job setting lines. I'm not implying that you should line bet unders or anything. It will come out pretty close or within the range where you'll lose the juice. But you can find some pretty sharp unders, and maybe it's these first half unders as these teams get comfortable on these neutral courts. It's going to be interesting to watch. There's a lot of strategy that goes into it. Matt, did you have something to say there, or do you want to move on?
I was going to say there's a 0% chance I'm in the green on overs this year. Unders, I think you can find success, especially in games that are the good thing that you can do with the late game fouling is try to find games where there won't be late game fouling. Games where the spread is, in the double digits, and you think that, you're probably not picking a 15-point favorite in conference tournament play. But if you do think that's kind of the way it leans, then instead of picking that, maybe you go under because you're avoiding the foul game. But that's just overs. You'd think, okay, let's foul, go over. The downside with overs this time of year is there's a lot of pressing, there's a lot of pressure, and there's a lot of slowing the game down. And I personally find in intense basketball, the pace often slows down. You want to get a high quality shot. Yeah. You feel like, these are college kids. They don't want to take a shot they're not sure in a game with such high stakes. And I find that the pace slows down a fair bit, but then you and everything's balanced again with the fouling. So there's no real way to have an edge there.
I
Yeah, and
agree.
that's a
And I
good
think,
point.
yeah,
So I was gonna say that's a good point you guys made about like the first half hundreds in the neutral courts. Like some of these places, like I don't know, where the Missouri Valley always holds their conference tournament, where they got rims like the outside of my driveway. You know what I mean? Like sometimes these Missouri Valley games, the unders.
yeah,
But if you watch those early games in the tournament, you can start to see sometimes these rims are off, or there's play, and then it might take the market a game or two to catch up, and you can get ahead of the curve there.
yeah, definitely. And I think, something that always comes back to being one of the ultimate truths right now, and I know you guys agree in college basketball, is honestly that it's matchup based, right? Is that you want to look into the matchup. You want to understand the systems that are playing here. You want to understand the way these coaches are running their teams, the types of shots they take. It's not the NBA. These guys don't have ultimate green lights when they have like good looks. Usually they run offense to get a specific shot. And if they don't, they keep moving, and they have players, at the end of the shot clock where, okay, sure, if it's like a broken possession or they can't get anything, it's a little different. But you do want to understand the type of motion, the type of, are they running the pick and roll? Are there guys coming off the dribble? How do teams defend? What type of space are they getting? The type of process? A lot of that stuff is important to, really break down who's going to have success developing good shots. And then you just hope that your guys make the good looks, right? After that, we all know that sometimes the good looks miss and sometimes the bad looks fall, and you have to live and die with it. And the goal is really to put yourself in favorable positions in the games where there aren't those, I guess, extreme examples of variance, and we're nowhere close to the line, for example. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of the tournaments kicking off over the weekend. The first one we're going to discuss here is the Colonial. Want to hear maybe if you guys have a dark horse or you're taking some of the teams at the top. Tom, I'll come to you on this one. If you don't have to give out every single play, maybe just a lean, a feeling, a team you're watching, if they make a run, anything on the Colonial.
So I took Wilmington to win the regular season title, and a couple of weeks ago, boy, I was sitting pretty. I think I jinxed the heck out of myself by retweeting something saying we're in good shape. Since then, man, they have boy, did they screw up the last couple of weeks of the season. I still like them. I think they've been close the last couple of years. I think the reset will help them. You're getting a little value on the number because Charleston's the favorite. They've played Charleston well in the last couple of seasons. So I'm going to go with Wilmington here to finally get over the hump and win the conference tournament.
I like it. Okay, that's a good one. I think a lot of people are definitely looking at Charleston. There's definitely going to be some value, maybe taking someone else than, I guess, the team that's talked about, right? The popular team. I tend to think that when you're hearing about a team too much, it's usually part of like the culture within college basketball, right? It's an exciting team. They went, they only had a couple losses last season. They look decently similar, returned a few players, but are they going to have the same oomph? It's a really tough conference. There's a couple really good teams in there. Matt, any Colonial teams that you have that maybe could disrupt Charleston's path to win the Colonial?
I mean, first of all, let me just say that we're talking about, sort of throwing away some regular season results. I think that the CAA is the ultimate league to do that with, because the regular season kindly is trash. Half the teams are in the mid 300s in Ken Palm, and half the teams are in the 100s. It seems like there's no middle. Half of the games are 15-point spreads. I barely bet it because where's any value, at least on spreads? Yep. So if I'm looking at a team that might disrupt things, especially because Wilmington, sort of backslid into the tournament, and Hofstra and Charleston are both super 3-point variant, they can get cold and lose a game. I'm wondering maybe if Delaware steps up. They're a team that a lot of people liked coming into the year. Their entire starting lineup the last few games, all seniors. They basically play 6-7 guys. So I like the veteran experience. I like their guard play. They're not really great at anything, but they also have size, and they're not really bad at anything. So they get the winner of Elon Hampton, which I don't think is really going to be a challenge. Yeah. And then if they win that one, they get Hofstra. And I think that those are two teams that are really short benches. Delaware's much bigger. They lost by 5 at Hofstra early in the year. That was their only matchup. I can see them getting past Hofstra and perhaps making a run for this thing. And I believe Delaware also made a run to the CAA finals. Maybe it was last year or 2 years ago. So at least they have that experience there.
Yeah, no, I totally
made the
agree.
tournament 2 years ago. That's what it was.
Yeah, they did. missing Jameer Nelson Jr., of course, transferred and going to be in the tournament on his own right. I am realizing in my embarrassment, it's the Coastal now, so that's my bad. So that's just me rushing.
I forgot all about it myself.
I know, right?
So don't worry about it.
It's the first year, so got to change that name. But no, I think this is going to be a really fun tournament. It's wide open. I don't like taking the teams at the tops of these ones where I think there could be some disruption. A lot of teams do take a lot of threes, and I think that's really important because you can have a lot of variance, especially in the first game teams play. If they rely on the three, they can come out cold, and it can be a little insurmountable, especially if they're laying points on the spread. Very interesting sort of to dive into. But let's move on now to the SoCon. Tom, I'll come to you first. Anything here, the Southern Conference, a bit of a fun one, but this one is going to tip off over the weekend as well. So a little ahead of the game, but that's what we like. We want to make sure that this is a fun conversation to listen to for a few days. And why wouldn't it be? It's going to be available on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify every single 4 p.m. episode. The panels that we have on, the guests that we have on, you can check them out. We've had some fun conversations already. And almost done with this one. We got a couple more topics, but doing great, guys. Super happy you're here. Killing it. Super sharp minds, obviously. Sportsline, The Score. These guys have been doing it, proving it all season long. But let's talk a little bit about, a conference that maybe not too many people have had an eye on. I like those conferences. Maybe you can get a real edge early in them because they might not even be watched. You might be able to see who's playing hot. But let's hear it. Tom, anyone you're eyeing in the SoCon?
Yeah, so this is one of those conferences I circle, not even just for betting, is that I want to watch. I think this is a conference that has 3 or 4 teams, if they win it, could be trouble in the NCAA tournament. Now, I do think Samford is the best team. Like the Horizon, I'm interested in the 4-5 game here. Furman and Western Carolina. Furman gives Samford all kinds of problems. Now, Samford finally got them this year at home by 2 points, and I think Samford's a lot better than them this year. I had Samford a couple years ago to win both the regular season and conference titles. Man, they could not get over Furman. So Furman has Samford's number. So if they win that first game, Furman's had some injuries this year, but Chattanooga, I think, is interesting. Western Carolina, if they beat Furman, I think is interesting. So this is one of those leagues. I don't know if I'm going to bet anything in it, but I'm really interested to watch it because I think whoever emerges is going to be a handful in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
I want to see Vontarius Woolbright in the big dance. I'm just going to say it. He's like spectacular. His stats are awesome. He's been doing it. If you haven't watched him play, I mean, Western Carolina, man, he is their MVP. It's not even close. Matt, what do you make of this conference? Any other players you're watching? Some really great ones, of course. Always a hotbed for some transfers. Who are we going to see in a big name jersey next year? Could be coming from the SoCon. What do you make of this tournament? And have at it.
Yeah, I think I'm a big play style guy, and there's a ton of different play styles at the top of the SoCon, which makes it really fun. Samford, of course, is playing buckyball, ton of steals, ton of threes. Furman is offensively elite as they are every year. They don't have the star power they had in years past. They have JP Pegues, who's great, but they don't have a Jalen Slauson like they did last year, or Mike Bothwell. And then my pick, that's one of my favorite bets personally of the future season, is UNC Greensboro, partially because I just don't really trust buckyball in a tournament setting. I think he has one career SoCon tournament victory. Granted, that was over UNC Greensboro. But Samford plays so many players and they play such a loose style, and they kind of bank on one of their role players having a great game. And I just wonder if when games get slower, when stars start starring, is there a Samford guy that's going to come through? Jermaine Marshall is probably their best player, but he's not really an ISO guy. Versus when I look at UNC Greensboro, they have Mikhail Brown-Jones, who's probably going to win Player of the Year in the league, and they have the Langley brothers, who are both fifth-year seniors, who have both played a ton of basketball. And when you think about those three guys, I think that's probably the type of nucleus that can go on a March run, and a March run might actually lead into March Madness. They could win a game or two in the tournament if they advance. So I do like their style in this type of tournament.
I like it. And they're getting that bye too. Tom, any take on UNCG?
Yeah, that's another one of the teams that are really good. They win on the road, and that I think it's hard to look at seeding in this conference because the top 5 seeds to me are any one of those teams can make a run and win this. So I agree. I like the way Samford plays. I do think sometimes in a tournament setting, maybe that hurts them a little bit. So I wouldn't go with the favorite here. I think there's plenty of value down the board with a Western Carolina or a Greensboro or a Furman that could come out of this conference and make the tournament.
You heard it here first, guys. I mean, it's the right take. I think it's going to be a bit of a wide open conference. It continues to build on what we've been saying, which is that it's hard to sort of take any one team as better than another, just by looking at what seedings, regular season performance. You really want to dig into these matchups, try to figure out how these players are going to line up, what these systems are going to do, how the defenses are going to really work against offenses that you do have some examples of, right? They've seen each other enough. Let's talk about our last conference. We got out of here. It's been a great conversation already. We don't got to push it. It's the perfect amount of time, a nice 40, 45 minutes. Let's talk about the Summit. A little bit out west, not my personal forte, but some fun teams and a little bit of maybe a stronger favorite. I tried to keep the ones with the strong favorites at the bottom. We're not really talking about the America East today. It's just, come on. But what do you make of South Dakota State, Tom? Zeke Mayo, he is a powerhouse. I think he's another type of player I'm excited to see in the tournament. Is this theirs to win and run away with, or is there going to be a challenger?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm with you. The Summit Conference isn't a conference I bet a lot for whatever reason, unless it's college football. That one AA football market, if you're not betting it, get on board. It's not bad. I don't. Colgate and South Dakota State are similar to me this year. They're not their normal dominant selves, but they're still the best in the conference, which means I do think another team could sneak in there and maybe steal it. I'm looking at the bottom of the bracket because I think South Dakota State's in the finals. Then you got North Dakota sitting down there in the bottom of the bracket. I think they're good enough to make a run to the finals, the 3 seed, and face South Dakota State. So if you're looking for a little bit of value, I'd look at North Dakota.
I like it. They've really come up. They were one of the worst teams in college basketball, had a big game against South Dakota State at home, lost it. Definitely itching to get that big win against the giant in the conference. So I think, a little chip on their shoulder. Matt, what do you make of the Summit? Are you a UND fan here, or are you maybe, taking the shorter price on the favorite to come out of this one and maybe even make a run in the big dance?
Okay, hear me out. This is going to get a little crazy, but
this is what I like. We're at the end of the episode. Perfect timing.
Yeah, and I'm not putting my life savings on this, and don't put your life savings on this. But what if I told you there was a team playing on the opening day, the 8th seed, that has 2 starters that played in the NCAA tournament last year and beat the 1 seed this year? That's Oral Roberts. That happened. Ooh. They have Isaac McBride and Kareem Thompson, who are both 5th-year seniors who played on multiple great ORU teams. They beat South Dakota State, granted at home, but they beat them earlier this year. They're on a 5-game losing streak. They've been absolutely horrific defensively, but they shoot a ton of threes, and South Dakota State shoots a ton of threes. We know how variant the Summit League can be, and that's why it's a hard one to bet. I'm not saying that, and especially because this tournament's on a neutral site, but it's in South Dakota, it definitely favors the South Dakota teams and the Dakota teams in general. Not many people are coming from Tulsa, Oklahoma up to watch this tournament and support Oral Roberts. But especially if the spread is, I don't think it'll be a crazy number. But if ORU can even get past South Dakota in the 8-9 game, I don't hate perhaps a little bit of money line on Oral Roberts to come and win that game.
Hey, Max in the chat agrees. No, I love it. I think, again, sometimes that variance is what you want to bet into because they could get electric hot and everything could fall. And all of a sudden, a 30-1 shot. They win a game or two and you're managing a position. I think we all agree that, you're probably not carrying that one to the grave with you. You want to manage it. You want to at least hedge, take a little money out. If you want to still ride with that team and try to cash it, I'm all for it. But make some smart moves. And speaking of smart moves, getting these guys on the show was one. I got one more little question for you, a little gift, a departing lob, because it's a hot topic. Every single March Madness, it starts to come out. Everyone starts being like, can you beat a team 3 times? Tom, what do you make of the hot topic, the triple, the dagger? What I tend to lean into, that's kind of, phooey, and teams can beat each other 3 times. All the time it happens.
No, I agree. One of the things I look at, like, like say a team owns another team, what I'll look at, has it been the same 2 coaches?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
then maybe a coach owns a coach. That's where I think there's value in there. I don't, like I said, Wright State and Northern Kentucky played twice. They were both kind of, even games with 10 minutes to go, and they ended up on 7 and 6. So yeah, Wright State won both times, but does that mean it's impossible for Northern Kentucky to win the 3rd game? I think that's just one of those narratives that people fall into, especially in the bigger conferences. But like you, unless it's a coaching thing where one coach has a nice record over another coach, and that could be the reason why, I personally, the way I handicap, many years ago, someone told me something I never forgot. Each game's its own entity. It's every game. I know we like to talk about, line moves and everything, but the kids on the court don't know. They're playing basketball. So that's how I break down each game.
Yeah, and I'll jump in before I let Matt go. Something that kind of relates that I keep with me is always trying to remember that, what the objective is in the game, right? And you want to align. Sometimes you want to make sure you align your bets with what's going on the court, which is often teams trying to win. And that's another thing that can make you, understand the game a little bit more. But Matt, we'll come to you, the 3 in a row, fallacy, or any other betting conspiracies that you want to tackle here before we get out of here.
Yeah, it means nothing. It really doesn't.
Good.
In my personal opinion, I'm betting style, and I'm adding in other elements to betting when it comes into it. But style reigns supreme. Like you mentioned, Northern Kentucky, they play their funky zone. If you can't score against their zone, you can't score against their zone. In the NEC tournament, when you're playing Merrimack, how have teams fared this season against the zone? You're not going to magically find a way to beat a defense that is out of the ordinary if you never beat it. And I think we're going to have a great example of this. Fingers crossed we get App State and James Madison in the Sun Belt final, because that would be an absolutely fantastic game. I'm sure that's on national TV. It's going to be a banner game for mid-major basketball. App State swept them this year, and I would personally be on App State if that line is near 1 possession, if that ends up being the finals. And hopefully the market goes against that because of the 3 times adage, and hopefully App State gets that job done. I make some money, the adage gets proven false, and we all win.
Boom. I love it. I love it. Now, that about sums it up for the panel, but I do want to let my amazing guests tell you guys at home where you can hear more about them. That's part of the fun of this show. We are trying to connect people with other great voices that maybe they haven't heard of, maybe they want to hear a little bit more of. So, Tom, where can people find some of your work here as we continue to dive into March?
Yeah, you can get all my picks for this for March at Sportsline, and I'm going to have a bunch of analysis at NOLA.com where I dive a little bit deeper than just picks. And you can follow me on Twitter at the Tom Casale.
Hey, Sportsline class of 24, Sportsline class of 22. Matt, where can people follow up with some of your stuff? Where are you posting your picks? I mean, you got the whole spreadsheet. Tell people about it.
Yeah, so the spreadsheet is currently, I think we're done for the year. We had a great season, a lot of viewers coming in. But for March, really busy with my actual job at the Score. We're going to have a lot of content coming up. That'll be up on my Twitter page and on the Score app. If you're looking at college basketball scores all day long, you should have the Score app. They're really quick with updating it, and go to the news feed and see some of my analysis as March goes along.
Yeah, you guys do a lot of great work. Really excited that both Tom and Matt were able to join me today on the Justin Perri Show. We'll be back on Friday, 4 p.m., of course, every single Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Some of the best guests you'll find, some great New York City noise. It is always a good time to come out here, bring some great guests on, and chop it up. We will also be having our first live March episode. So late night, we're going to be just getting on the stream. Some of the guys you've seen before will just join me. We'll just hang out, have a good time, and it'll be a blast. So look out for that. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. Turn live notifications on Twitter so that when we are broadcasting, you get told, then you don't miss a thing. It's going to be a good time. But thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Justin Perri Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere that you can find us, Twitter, Instagram, follow me on TikTok. You know the whole drill. I'll see you next time on TJPS.